Temporary event permit. Expected attendance, 60. Event coordinator, Nora L. Bennett. I didn't sign this. A call came from the fire department asking about patio heaters and cases of chafing fuel. I said I hadn't ordered any. They said it was all under my permit. Then I saw a post online, neighbors tagging my address, saying they couldn't wait for the big family party at my house. My house, my name, my signature, faked. You ever realize it's easier was never for you? 5 years of small favors, holidays, birthdays, baby showers, all landing on the same kitchen counter. $9,000 gone in food and supplies I never meant to give away. Not a bill, just a wake-up. And when they showed up again with a smile and a box of lemon bars telling me not to embarrass the family, I finally said no. I went to City Hall and filed my own note. This permit was submitted without my consent. I will not host this event. And that was the first time I realized something simple. Boundaries aren't rude. They're doors you're finally allowed to lock. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about a word that changed everything. No. Because the day that permit arrived was the day my daughter learned how to be my daughter, and I learned how to be me. On a breezy Thursday in May in Maple Ridge, Ohio, Nora Bennett stood in her quiet kitchen and listened to the old refrigerator hum like a tired neighbor. The maple trees outside her window threw shade over the driveway, and the mail truck rattled past like it always did at lunchtime. Her house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac where people waved from driveways, where dogs barked at squirrels, where the garbage truck came every Tuesday at 7:05, and the HOA newsletter always smelt faintly of copier ink. Her phone lit up on the counter. Lena, it said, with a little photo of her only child wearing sunglasses she never took off her pictures. Nora dried her hands on a dish towel and answered, "Hey, honey." "Mom, quick thing," Lena said sweet and fast, that tone she put on when she wanted something big to sound like something small. "Tyler's family wants to do a sip-and-see for the baby over 4th of July weekend. Our condo's tiny, so we figured we'd do it at your place. Nothing crazy, maybe 40 people? You do devil eggs better than anyone. 40? Could be 50 if the Dayton cousins come. You know how they are, last-minute RSVPs. We'll reimburse everything. You just do your potato salad and baked beans. Ooh, your peach cobbler. Paul is obsessed. And maybe grab brisket from Costco. And can you rent a couple patio heaters? Tyler's dad hates being chilly. In July. He hates being chilly." Lena repeated. "And chafing fuel so the trays stay hot. We can buy cases at Restaurant Depot. It's cheaper. And Aunt Pam is gluten-free now. Uncle Walt went off dairy. Paula doesn't do spicy. And Tyler's Framo prefers her meat cremated." She laughed. "We'll help, of course. I'll set out napkins or something. It'll be cute. I'll send you a Pinterest board." "Who's cleaning up?" "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's family. You always say it keeps you young when the house is busy." Lena's voice softened to the coaxing register she'd used as a teenager asking for the car. "We can count on you, right? I already told Paula." There was the teapot beginning to sing. Nora lifted it, turned the flame low. "Let me look at my calendar." And she ticked that as a yes because that's what Lena always did. "Perfect. Okay, love you. We'll figure out the food. Reimburse you after. Tyler says hi." After the call, Nora set her phone down and stood in the quiet kitchen with the kettle singing like it had stepped on a nail. She poured water over a tea bag and watched the brown plume curl like smoke. Then she turned to the calendar on the fridge, blue pen for doctor's appointments, green for church pantry shifts, red for birthdays. The 4th had a little flag sticker and nothing else. Space. Quiet. A long day she had planned to spend on the porch with a library book and a bowl of cherries. She told herself it was fine. Family, a baby. It would be fine. She took her tea to the porch and sat in one rocker while the other sat empty next to the ceramic cardinal her late husband Frank bought her at a county fair. "That bird's going to outlast both of us," he said, grinning, and then he went and made sure of his half of the prophecy. 2 years gone, and she still found herself reaching for the remote to turn up the ball game for him, still catching her breath at the sound of a certain cough in the grocery store line. The mail carrier walked up the drive, waved, and slid envelopes into the mailbox. She carried her tea down the steps and opened the mailbox. Gas bill, a coupon for car washes, the HOA newsletter with the headline, "Summer Block Party, no fireworks inside the cul-de-sac, please," and a white envelope from Maple Ridge City Hall. She took it inside, slid it with the back of a butter knife, and pulled out a single-page document with a blue seal. Temporary event permit. Approved. Under event location, 617 Lone Birch Court. Under event date, July 4. Under expected attendance, 60. Under event coordinator, Nora L. Bennett. Her name, her address, the city seal, and an e-signature that wasn't hers. Nora stared until the black letters went a little fuzzy. The refrigerator clicked off and the house let out one of those old house sighs, like it had taken off a heavy coat. She set the permit on the counter and tapped her fingernail against the blue seal. Then her phone buzzed. "Mrs. Bennett, this is Fire Marshal Reese with Maple Ridge Fire," a voice said, bright and polite. "Just confirming we received delivery notice for 2 6-foot patio heaters and 3 cases of chafing fuel for July 4th. We'll do a quick morning walkthrough for safety. Those fuel cans can get squirrely under a tent." "I didn't order heaters," Nora said. Pause. "Well, someone did. It's all under your permit. No worries. We just like to check ignition sources and exits, the usual." Nora thanked him and hung up. The kettle on the stove had cooled. She poured the cold tea down the sink, set the kettle back on the burner, and turned off the flame without lighting it. Her phone lit up again, this time with a Facebook notification. A neighbor had tagged her address. "Can't wait for the Fowler Sip and See at Nora's. Best yard in the neighborhood." There was a mock-up photo of a balloon arch over her porch and a chalkboard sign in a fancy font, "Welcome Fowler Family." In the comments, someone had posted, "Bless her heart, she's a force." Her chest felt tight, the way it did on nights in the ER when the lobby filled with flu cases and she could see the shift sliding out from under her. She took the permit, tucked it under the magnet shaped like a watermelon slice, and steadied herself with both hands on the counter. Then she texted her friend May. "You free for coffee? I need adult supervision." "Meet me at Maple and Main in 20, May wrote back. They took their usual booth by the window, the one that had a rip in the red vinyl patched with clear tape, the one where they could see the hardware store across the street with the American flag that never came down. Nora slid the permit across the table. The waitress topped off her coffee and left them with a plate of hash browns and a little tub of grape jelly. May put on her reading glasses and scanned the page. She laid the paper flat like it might try to fly away. "Honey," she said, "that's not a favor, that's commandeering." "I feel silly," Nora said, twisting a napkin into a string. "I mean, it's just a party, a baby party, family." "You don't look silly. You look like a woman holding a piece of paper someone else signed in her name. Did you ever count?" "Count what?" Nora asked. "How many times this has been expected versus asked?" Nora thought of Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, the Super Bowl, and the shower before the baby was even a plan. She thought of Tyler's laugh in my living room and Paula's voice at the head of the table, issuing instructions like a crossing guard. She thought of wiping her counters at midnight while the dishwasher groaned and a stray balloon bobbed in the doorway to the hall. "Maybe it's my fault," she said. "I always say yes. It's easier for them if I do." May speared a hash brown. Have you ever noticed how "it's easier" always means for the person saying it? Nora felt herself smile with one corner of her mouth. She pushed her coffee cup away and took a steadying breath she would have told an anxious patient to take. She said, "I need to show you something." Back home, she reached up to the top shelf of the pantry and pulled down a thin blue ledger, the kind you buy in the school supply aisle, thinking it'll be useful someday. She had started it after Frank died, a nurse's habit, a widow's caution. In tight print, she had noted loans, grocery runs, the new tires when someone's bonus didn't come through, the months she covered the electric, the extra trays of food for parties that got bigger in the RSVPs than the original plan. Not to keep score, to keep track, she told herself, to watch the details, because details were what kept people safe in the ER and what kept a widow afloat when paperwork multiplied. She turned to the last page and added up the last 5 years with a little calculator that clicked like a toy. The total stared up at her, $9,387.66. She sat back in her chair and let her hands fall into her lap. She could hear Frank's voice as if he were in the hallway, clearing his throat. He used to say, "What are we doing, Nora?" when I took on too much at work or at church. He would say it with a smile and a hand on my shoulder, not a judgment, but a nudge. I said out loud into the quiet, "We're waking up." On her way to line dancing at the senior center that afternoon, Nora stopped at the bulletin board in the hallway, the one she usually breezed past on her way to the multipurpose room where the floor smelled faintly of pine sol. A flyer caught her eye. Holiday hosts needed. Volunteer at Bryce and Zion National Parks. 2-week stints, lodging provided, training for seniors, DC1 and JU1 waves. A photograph of red rock walls stacked like ancient cake. She tore off a tab with her shaky hand and put it in the pocket of her cardigan like a secret. She danced through Boot Scootin' Boogie with feet that remembered more than she expected, the line of widows and retirees moving in unison to a song they didn't have to pretend to like. She thought of a strip of sky between canyon walls, a visitor desk with a map, a straw hat with a cord. She thought of being useful to strangers in a way that wasn't about unpaid labor for people who told her she liked it that way. That evening, Lena called while Nora shelled peas at the kitchen table. "So, we're thinking lemonade and big drink dispensers, maybe 3. Also, can you deep clean the carpets before? Baby is crawling now." "Lena," Nora said, keeping her voice level, "a letter came from City Hall today. Someone filed a permit in my name." Silence. The sound of traffic in the background. "Oh, that. I sent in the form. It was just easier. Paula knows the woman at the desk. We needed the street parking approved." "You forged my signature." "You're being dramatic. Tyler's cousin is a graphic designer. He mocked up a Ketis welcome sign. And anyway, you always say you like the house busy. It keeps you young." Nora pictured the ceramic cardinal on the porch. It looked smug in a way that only inanimate objects can. "No," Nora said softly. "No what?" "No, I'm not hosting this."
"Excuse me?" Lena's voice sharpened, the way it had when she was 12 and someone said no to a sleepover. "I didn't get asked. I got assigned. There's a difference. And I signed up for something already. 2 weeks as a volunteer at Zion. I'll be gone that weekend." A small, shocked laugh crackled through the phone. "You? Traveling alone? To the desert? At your age?" "At my age," Nora said, and the words surprised her by how good they felt. "The only thing scarier than the desert is living like my time is free." "We'll just reimburse you. Buy the food and we'll pay you back. You don't have to be there." Nora opened the ledger with one hand and held the phone with the other. She let the number sit between them a second in her mind, then decided not to read it out loud. This wasn't about debt. It was about a habit so deep they both thought it was love. "This isn't happening at my house. Not on the 4th, Not with my name on a permit I didn't sign. Tyler's mom is going to lose it. She said you never put family out. Then she can host. The line went quiet, then a click. 2 days later, Paula Fowler showed up at Nora's door with a bakery box that weighed like it contained apologies. She stood on the porch in white sandals and a coral cardigan, her hair sharp enough to cut paper. "Nora, dear," she said, stepping into the living room without waiting to be invited, "I brought lemon bars." "You sure did." She carried them to the coffee table and set them on a coaster out of habit. Paula sat and crossed her legs. "Lena says there's some confusion about the 4th. Confusion is one word. This family gathering is important. The Fowlers are driving in from Dayton and Louisville. The men have already coordinated golf. The women have planned a little thing at the community center for the day before, crafts and such. People are counting on seeing the baby. You wouldn't want to embarrass Lena, would you?" Nora folded her hands in her lap. "Paula, how many times have you invited me to your home as a guest?" Paula blinked. "Well, there was the rehearsal dinner." Right, you were cooking in the church kitchen." "That's my point. When's the last time I came to your house and sat down while you poured me a cup of coffee?" Paula's mouth pinched. "If you're implying we've been ungrateful, I'm sure you've enjoyed doing it. Some women like," she twirled her fingers, "hosting. I like being asked, and I like being thanked. I don't like having a permit show up in my mail with my name and a signature I didn't sign." Paula straightened. "It was efficient. You're making a fuss over paperwork. It's not paperwork. It's my home." "What about the baby?" Paula said, last arrow in the quiver. "Grandmothers show up." "The baby deserves parents who don't conscript their grandmother to keep their promises." Paula left the lemon bars and her perfume behind. When the door shut, Nora leaned against it and closed her eyes. She could feel her heart like a hand drumming on a tabletop. She carried the bakery box to the counter, cut a square, and ate it over the sink. It was too sweet. She wrapped the rest for May. In the morning, Nora took the bus to City Hall. She wore the denim jacket she'd had since Frank surprised her with it on a fall weekend when they'd browsed the outlet mall with coffees in hand. She carried the permit in a manila folder like a school assignment. The clerk behind the plexiglass looked at the page through readers and said, "Well, Miss Bennett, that's approved. If you want to cancel, we need the coordinator." "That's me." "The person who applied." "That's not me." And the clerk looked over her glasses with a kind of world-weary tenderness people who deal with people for a living reserve for honest folks who are stuck in a bad middle. "You can file a statement. We'll put a note on it. The fire marshal will see it, so will the police detail." "Please do," and she wrote neatly in her careful ER nurse block print, "This permit was submitted without my knowledge or consent. I will not host this event." When she slid the statement back under the plexiglass, the clerk gave her a little nod, the kind that says, "Good, you said a thing that needed saying." Back home, the phone rang. "Mrs. Bennett? Fire Marshal Reese again," the cheerful voice said. "Got your note. Thanks for the heads up. Those patio heaters and fuels won't be delivered to your place. People treat easier like okay sometimes. We see it every graduation season." "Thank you," Nora said, and she meant it for more than heaters. A few days later, Nora walked into the Maple Ridge Senior Center's orientation just as a ranger rolled in a TV cart. 12 volunteers sat in metal chairs in a rectangle like school kids. A man with sun-creased skin and a buzzed gray haircut introduced himself as Ranger Kip and smelled like sunscreen and pine needles. He said, "We're going to talk hydration, maps, and the difference between a canyon wren and any other brown bird," he said, smiling. "Welcome to summer in the desert. You'll be fine. You'll also be hot." A man took the seat beside Nora, fidgeted with the cap of his pen, and set it down with a tiny clack. He said, "I'm Cal McKenzie, retired mail carrier. My daughter says if I don't get out more, my recliner will fuse to my spine." "Nora Bennett," she said.
offering her hand. "Retired ER nurse. My daughter says the desert will kill me. I told her I've already done night shift. Sandstone can't be worse." Cal laughed in that way that makes a person want to try again to be funny. "Want to be map buddies? Someone to say, 'You're holding it upside down, Cal.' No strings, just company." Company without assignments, and they shook on it. The night before she left, Lena came by without the stroller. No jewelry, no sunglasses, just a daughter with shadows under her eyes, hair pulled into a messy knot like she had done it in a mirror while thinking of something else. "You're really going," she said, staring at the small suitcase by the door. Sensible shoes lined up next to it, a straw hat with a chin cord hooked over the handle. "I am," Nora said. "You picked being a park greeter over meeting my in-laws," Lena said, not quite accusing, not quite pleading. "I picked a promise to myself. For years, I picked everyone else." Lena's mouth wobbled, and then she forced it back straight. "Tyler says you do this to stay relevant, that you make everything about you." "If I wanted attention," Nora said, "I'd host 60 Fowlers and post it on Facebook." Lena let out a breath that trembled as it left her. "I didn't know the permit would upset you." "You didn't ask," Nora said. She reached up to the fridge, took down the blue ledger, set it on the counter, opened it, let Lena look at the small, neat numbers marching down the page, and then closed it again. "This isn't a bill. I kept this to wake myself up. I want to be your mother, not your caterer." "What am I supposed to do?" Lena whispered. "Reserve the community center. Pick up trays. Ask Tyler to carry his share. Tell Paula to bring her famous cheese straws and not her clipboard." "That costs money," Lena said, like it was a fact and a protest. "So did my time." Lena looked at the floor a long moment. When she raised her head, her eyes were still shiny, but her voice had changed. "You're really not coming." "I'm really not." And she walked her daughter to the door and hugged her grown child the way you hand over a key you've been holding too long. Utah was red rock and sky. The plane touched down in Las Vegas. The shuttle climbed past places with names like Hurricane and Virgin, and then it was canyon walls and a thin ribbon of river, and a heat that felt like it could iron a shirt just by looking at it. Nora checked into the volunteer dorm, a clean, spare building with bunk beds and hooks for hats. She made her bunk with hospital corners because you don't unlearn habits like that. In the mornings, she stood behind the visitor center desk and smiled at families in matching t-shirts, at retirees in wide-brimmed hats, and teenagers trying to pretend they were too cool for nature. She pointed to shaded trails on laminated maps and said, "Drink water like your mom's watching," and watched people laugh and tuck a bottle into a pocket. She told them where to find the best view if their knees complained, how to listen for the canyon wren's song, and how to notice the way the light changed the wall by the hour. One afternoon, a boy came in with a scraped knee and dirt on his cheeks. He said, "I fell," on the verge of tears, as if falling were an accusation. "It happens to the best of us," Nora said, cleaning the scrape with the steady, sure hands of a woman who had sutured growling men and soothed women in labor. She put a Spider-Man bandage on his knee and handed him a sticker. The boy's mother mouthed, "Thank you," and Nora felt something in her chest loosen and set itself back in a place that made sense.
In the evenings, she and Cal walked to a diner where the ice was too generous and the iced tea came in tall plastic tumblers that sweated onto paper napkins. The ceiling fans made a little show of spinning, and the walls were hung with black and white photographs of people standing in front of rocks like they could claim them. Cal told her about Judy.
his wife, gone 3 years now, and the way the house sounded at night when he turned off the TV and the air conditioner clicked into a different rhythm. He told her about his route, the lady with the beagle, the man who insisted on coming to the door in his robe. He told her about the way his daughter hovered, how love could feel like someone putting their hand on the small of your back and trying to steer. Nora told him about Frank, about the years of night shift and Christmas in the ER and the things people say in waiting rooms when they think no one can hear. She told him about salad casserole and church suppers and how some people think bless your heart is a prayer and some use it like a knife. She told him about the permit that showed up like a summons and the ledger and the way she said no and the way the word felt in her mouth. Firm, not mean. Settled, not cold. One day, a text buzzed in while Nora stood in a patch of shade and watched a line of rented bikes go by. We moved it to the community center, Lena wrote. Rented folding chairs. Paula complained. Tyler and I fought. We figured it out. People brought trays from Kroger. The world didn't end. Baby drooled on everyone. Nora started to smile. Then another. I'm sorry about the permit. I thought saying it's easier was the same as it's okay. It's not. She typed carefully with her thumbs. Thank you for telling me. Then, when you get back, can you show me how to make your deviled eggs? Like, actually teach me? I'll take notes. Happy to, Nora wrote. One condition, you do the dishes, and we eat them warm from the tray. Deal, came the reply with a little egg emoji. Cal read her face and tilted his head. Looks like somebody learned how to carry their own picnic basket, he said. Looks like somebody learned how to say no, she said, and he grinned and raised his water glass like a toast. On the third evening at the volunteer house, a woman came in looking sunburned and wobbly. I don't feel right, she said. And Nora was up from the table with a bottle of water and a cool, damp towel before Ranger Kip could pivot in his chair. Sip, not gulp. She took the woman's wrist and counted, her lips moving without sound, old training. She felt the pulse slow under her fingers. She smiled. There you are, she said. Good body, knows what to do. After, Ranger Kip leaned on the doorframe and watched the pink fade from the woman's cheeks. You've got that nurse thing, he said to Nora. You make room for people to come back to themselves. Nora shrugged and felt a little shy about being seen. I had good teachers, she said. He nodded at the view outside the window, the canyon walls like the inside of a bell. And now the canyon's got you, he said. Time slowed the way it does when you are someplace that doesn't care what time it is. The sun came up. People asked for maps. The sun went down. The canyon held its breath, then exhaled in the dark. Nora and Cal played cards on the porch and argued about whether the moon looked different here. They put their names on the list for the Friday pancake breakfast at the local firehouse, but didn't make it back in time, and Nora felt a sudden, ridiculous pang that she might not get to meet Fire Marshal Reese and tell him thank you in person for being kind on the phone. On their last afternoon, she and Cal hiked a short trail and stood in a place the brochure called the Overlook. The air felt like a warm hand. In the distance, thunder argued with itself. They didn't talk for a while because some places want you to shut up and listen. You ever think, Cal said, not turning his head, that maybe we're allowed to be more than the one job we got good at? The mail carrier, the nurse, the hostess. I think that's what the desert is for, Nora said. They flew home on a Tuesday, Nevada falling away under the wing, and then the patchwork of the Midwest pulling them in. On the ground in Columbus, the air felt heavier, more familiar. The shuttle smelled like old coffee and someone's cologne. I watched a man in a suit hold his phone to his ear and say, "We'll circle back," and felt a gratitude to be circling back to something different. Back at the house, the maple leaves had gone from spring green to summer lush. A new puddle of chalk on the sidewalk spelled H.I. in child handwriting. Nora put her suitcase by the hall closet and stood in her living room like a tourist experiencing a famous quiet. She did small, ridiculous things with reverence. She watered the fern on the bookshelf. She refolded a stack of dish towels. She took the blue ledger off the counter and slid it into the bottom desk drawer, not like evidence, but like something that had taught her a lesson and now could rest. The next day, she turned the smallest bedroom, the one where Frank used to keep a fishing rod and propped in the corner, into a space for a folding table and an easel she brought from the thrift store. She spread out watercolor paper and squeezed paint onto a white plastic palette like toothpaste. The first brushstroke felt like a kind of prayer she had learned to say without words. On Thursdays, she taught watercolor for beginners at the library. 5 women and a man in a ball cap sat around a table and turned paper navy by accident and laughed. The librarian, a pretty girl with a tattoo of a branch across her forearm, put a sign on the desk. "Please do not rest paintbrushes in the drinking fountain. Thank you." On Tuesdays, Nora and May pushed the art cart down a hall at the county hospital and handed brushes to people in gowns who wanted to do something with their hands that wasn't fear. They taped paintings of cardinals and flowers to the bulletin board, and the hall got brighter one square of copier paper at a time. Lena came by on Sunday afternoons. Sometimes she brought the baby, who smelled like graham crackers and sunshine. Sometimes she came alone with her hair in a ponytail and no phone in her hand and said, "Tell me about your week," and meant it. She asked questions that weren't assignments and listened to answers that weren't troubleshooting. Twice, she sat at the kitchen table and wrote down in careful print Nora's deviled egg recipe while Nora talked about why you salt the water and how you lay a damp paper towel over the tray to keep them from crusting. After they ate, Lena stood at the sink and did the dishes. The first time, she broke one of the good plates and cried and said, "I'll replace it." And Nora said, "It's a plate." And they both laughed like people who had held their breath too long and finally remembered how to let it out. Tyler was still Tyler. He talked too loud about golf and not loud enough about gratitude. But he loaded folding chairs into the back of a rented pickup without being asked. And once, unprompted, he said, "Thanks, Nora," after she handed him a cooler. It wasn't perfect. It was progress. People don't usually clap when a person changes a little. They assume it's wind. Nora decided to clap quietly anyway, in her own head. Paula called in September and said, "We're doing Thanksgiving at our place this year. Would you like to come as a guest? Bring whatever you want or nothing at all. I'll have the gravy handled." "Thank you," Nora said. "I'll bring rolls and a pie and a willingness to help with dishes if you ask." There was a pause, and in it, a small human sound of a person realizing they'd been missing a point. "I'll ask," Paula said, "and I'll say thank you." In November, the Maple Ridge Fire Department sent a postcard about their holiday pancake breakfast. Nora went with May and stood in a line that smelled like syrup and coffee. Fire Marshal Reese stood by the door in a red sweater over a white shirt, greeting people by name. Nora waited until the line thinned and then said, "You called me about patio heaters in July." He snapped his fingers. "Mrs. Bennett, I know you from the permit note. I tell that story to rookies. Just because it's easier doesn't mean it's okay. Best thing I heard all summer. You get that volunteer gig?" "I did. I learned to say no better." "Good," the marshal said, and he smiled so big she could see the missing piece where a molar ought to be. He put a pamphlet in my hand. "Holiday safety. Water plus heat equals steam. Steam equals burns. You'd be surprised." "I wouldn't," Nora said, and they both laughed like people who had seen more than one avoidable mess. Cal came over on Wednesdays with a plastic bag that always held oranges he swore were on sale at Myers. He had started piano lessons at the senior center and could play Jingle Bells haltingly in a way that could make you tear up if you weren't careful. "Company without assignments," he'd say from the doorway, and Nora would point to the cupboard with the good mugs. They sat at their kitchen table and ate slices of orange and talked about the small plot lines of their week. He said things like, "My daughter worries I'll slip in the shower." And Nora said, "She loves you." And he said, "I know," and rolled his eyes the way people roll their eyes when they say "I know," because love can be heavy-handed. She told him about the art class and about the woman at the hospital who painted a sunflower with so much yellow that it looked like opening a door. On a morning when the sun rose like it minted, Nora took her coffee to the porch. The ceramic cardinal caught the light and threw it back. The mail truck came, and the carrier lifted a hand without slowing. The mailbox held the electric bill, a flyer for a blood drive, and a holiday card from the fire marshal with a picture of the whole department in front of a ladder truck. On the back, in a crooked scrawl someone had personalized, was a note. "Thanks for keeping the community safe. See you at the pancake breakfast. Remember, steam burns." Nora laughed out loud. She went inside to her art nook and pinned a card above the easel. She'd been writing to herself for months without quite knowing it. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks we finally learned to use. No isn't unloving. It's the way love grows up. She read it once, then again, until the words settled into the space behind her heart. She dipped a brush, drew a line of red across white paper, and watched it bloom and find its edge. She thought about how much she loved this house when it was full, and when it was quiet, when it was used and when it was her shelter. She thought about the ledger in the drawer, and the permit with her name, and the canyon where the air hummed like a chord. She thought about Lena, about how a person can unlearn a habit if someone who loves them stands still long enough in the doorway of the old pattern and says kindly, no. A week before Christmas, Lena called from the Kroger parking lot. The baby was chattering in the background, and Lena's voice sounded soft with cold and exhaustion and a kind of joy that comes from having done a hard thing you didn't think you could do. "Mom, I just made a grocery list for Christmas Eve. We're doing it here. I called the community center to borrow 6 folding tables. I asked Paula to bring her green beans, and she said yes and didn't give me a lecture. Tyler's in charge of trash and ice, and I wanted to ask, will you come and sit? Just come and be my mom, please."
"I will," Nora said, and her throat went tight. "And another thing," Lena said, and then she laughed hard enough that the baby laughed in sympathy. "I bought my own chafing fuel. I read the safety sheet." "Look at you," Nora said. Later, after the dishes, Lena leaned against the counter and said, "I almost filed a permit for New Year's brunch. I almost did it the old way. Then I heard your voice in my head say, 'How many times have you invited me as a guest?' And I put the pen down." "You saved yourself a speech from the fire marshal," Nora said. They both laughed so hard they had to sit down. In late January, snow fell in big, quiet coins and turned everything white until even the ugliest things looked forgiven. Nora and May took a tray of watercolor supplies to the hospital and set up in a room where a woman waited for test results. The woman's hand shook, and Nora put her own on top of it, a soft weight. "It'll still look like a flower," she said. When Nora got home, there was a new envelope in the mailbox from City Hall. She opened it at the counter because that's where she opened important things. Inside was a thank you note on cheap stock with the city seal. "Thank you," it said in a printed font, "for your service as a volunteer at Zion National Park." Signed by a city council member who had probably never been west of Missouri. It made her laugh and cry the way random kindness does when you're tired. In February, Cal knocked with his oranges and said, "We're doing a field trip to the piano store at the mall. Come laugh at me when I try not to buy a keyboard." In March, the community center called and asked if she could show a room of middle schoolers how to paint birds. She said yes and taught a flock of awkward children how to make a cardinal from simple shapes. One boy drew his bird with a giant eye. "He sees everything," the boy said, and Nora said, "Good," like it was a wish.
In April, she sat on the porch in the early evening and listened to somebody on the next street over mow the grass in stripes. Across the cul-de-sac, a neighbor she barely knew took a long look at her and then at the house and said, "You look lighter." And Nora said, "I am." And the woman nodded like it made sense. On Memorial Day, Lena hosted a barbecue at the community center with trays from a local smokehouse. The deviled eggs were Lena's. They were a little mustard heavy and a little lopsided and absolutely perfect. People said so, and Lena's cheeks went pink and she said thanks loud enough for the room to hear. When it was over, she put on rubber gloves and did the dishes while Tyler wiped the counters. And when people offered to help, she said yes and pointed them to tasks without apologizing for asking. In June, Nora went back to Utah for another 2 weeks. The canyon felt like a friend who let you show up without making you explain yourself. She took a picture at the overlook and texted it to Lena with a note that said, "This is what no looks like from the inside." Lena texted back a selfie of her and the toddler in the community center kitchen with flour everywhere. "This is what yes looks like when I mean it." Nora kept the messages. She liked their shape beside each other. In July, she got a postcard from Fire Marshal Reese that said, "Steam burns" in block letters with a cartoon of a pot. She stuck it on the freezer door because it made her feel like the world was both ridiculous and trying. In August, Cal learned to play Let It Be well enough that Nora recognized it by the third note. He looked up from the keyboard he finally bought and said, "You ever think about lessons?" And she said, "A woman can play an instrument at 71 if she wants." And he said, "A man can learn to cook eggs at 73. And they looked at each other like the kids they used to be. In September, a new flyer went up at the senior center, "Paint and Pancakes, fundraiser, proceeds to hospital art cart." Nora's name was on it without anyone asking her to run the kitchen. She taught a room of people to paint pancakes that looked like moons. Cal played Moon River and made 3 mistakes and made the room love him more for them. In October, Paula stopped by with a pie and said, on the porch in the exact place she had once wielded a bakery box as a badge, "I was wrong." And Nora said, "Thank you." And Paula said, "I'm learning." And Nora said, "Me too." And that was all either of them needed. The days did what days do. They piled up like books on a table you mean to read and sometimes don't. They gleamed like coins in a jar. They slid by like water in a place that doesn't waste rain. On a late afternoon, as the light went amber and the shadows from the maple leaves made the floor look like lace, Nora sat at her kitchen table and wrote a list titled, "What I Know Now." She wrote slowly, pressing hard enough that the back of the page carried the ghost of the words. It is not selfish to protect your time. Love that requires you to be exhausted is a debt, not a gift. You can teach grown children to treat you kindly by treating yourself kindly out loud. A home is not a venue. A no is a gift if it points people to their own competence. There is no age at which you must stop beginning. She tore the list off and taped it beside the note she had pinned above the easel months ago. She stepped back and looked at the 2 pieces of paper like they were paintings. Then she went to the porch, sat in the rocker beside the ceramic cardinal, and let the evening roll toward her like something she had ordered and gotten exactly right. She listened to a dog bark, to someone off a street over call a child inside, to the low hum of a lawnmower finishing its last pass. She watched the mail truck slow at the end of the street, brake lights bright in the dim. She carried the mail inside and opened a white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single card. On the front was a watercolor cardinal. Inside, a line in neat, upright print. "Thank you for teaching me how to be your daughter." It was signed with Lena's name and a little drawing of an egg with a halo above it. Nora sat down at the table and laughed until she cried, and cried until she felt like laughing again. She wiped her face on the hem of her shirt and said to no one and to everyone, "We're going to be okay." The refrigerator hummed, the house sighed, the cardinal gleamed, and somewhere in Utah, the canyon changed color as the sun fell, like it always does, whether anyone is watching or not. In the morning, she would go to the library and set out jars of clean water and stacks of paper. She would tell a room full of beginners that the trick is not to be afraid of white space. She would walk home past a community center where a sign would advertise bingo night and a blood drive, and a class where someone could learn to make deviled eggs on a Thursday at 7 for a suggested donation of $5. She would call Lena and tell her about a woman at the hospital who painted a field of yellow and called it sunlight, even though it looked like lemons. She would ask how the baby slept. She would not ask what Lena needed from her. She would wait and let her daughter ask if she wanted to, or let the conversation be two people telling each other about their lives. She would sit at the piano bench with Cal and watch his hands find notes. She would stir a pot of soup and remember to turn the handle in so it wouldn't catch on a sleeve, because people can learn and people can forget, and safety is just love with a different name. She would take a stack of envelopes to the mailbox and lift the flag and feel the small satisfaction of sending things out into the world and letting them go. And at night, when the house was quiet and the glass on the picture frames reflected the room, she would stand at the easel and make marks on paper and watch them become something true. She would sleep and wake and live and put her feet on the kitchen tile and say hello to herself and be glad to be home. Because this is what a different ending looks like. Not revenge, not a door slammed, not a ledger thrown like a weapon. Just a woman in a small Ohio house learning, finally, to treat herself the way she has always treated everyone else, with patience, with tenderness, with an eye for details and an insistence on truth. A woman who opens her mailbox and finds now and then not a permit with her forged name on it, but a note that says what most of us spend years longing to hear: "Thank you for who you are."